Chris, we were having this discussion about Hendon Hooker's Heisman chances and whether he'll get invited to New York. And goodness gracious knows, it's barely October. So anybody making projections right now is way, way, way ahead of themselves. But he is in the conversation. But we had Max Chadwick on from Pro Football Focus who did the odds. And he actually said that he thought, I'm curious as to what you think about this, that Bryce Young, even though, again, we're talking odds, which I know is not your ballpark and not mine either, but he actually has far less favorable odds than CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud is almost an even money bet to win the Heisman, whereas Bryce Young's about 9-1. But his point was that he thought that Bryce Young had actually played better. Now, that's from a gambling point of view. What's your point of view between how would you compare the two?
Well, C.J. Stroud has played better than Bryce Young thus far this year, and the Bryce hasn't played nearly, and there are reasons for that. Young receivers and whatnot, but it what I think people miss, and I get it. It's a whole industry of who's in the race now. There is no real race. The race hadn't started yet. It's really what happens in November. So, see, if I was going to forecast it, I would say that Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud are in still good position because their teams are going to win, and they're likely going to play good ball down the stretch. If I were to make a top five, Jalen Daniels of Kansas would be, right behind C.J. Stroud. I don't think that's going to last. It may not last beyond this week, depending on how they do against and how well he plays against TCU and they win. So I know, and I think it's fair that you could put Hendon Hooker in the mix. He doesn't play well this week, he's out. It's just kind of the way it is. In order for Hendon Hooker to win it, he's going to have to play well. Even if they don't win, he's going to have to play so well that he looks like the best player on the field against Georgia and Alabama. The likelihood of that is, I don't know. We'll see. And maybe have to pull an upset in at least one of those games. So I think when you're forecasting it, you're having to look and see, well, who do they have left and how does their team shake up against other people? Because the history of the award is who does the best in November? Well, we're a month away from that. So who plays best in November in the biggest games? I think you can be out of it now and work your way into it in November. But if you're in it now and you play poorly, then I think you work your way out. It's kind of an elimination type of award, fair or unfair, right or not. I think that's how it's going to always seems to play out, and I think that's going to play out this year.
C.J. Stroud plays. He's played a relatively pretty easy schedule thus far. Ohio State, normally plays a pretty easy schedule. However, going down the road, he has Iowa, which I know hasn't looked great offensively, but defensively pretty stout. He has Penn State. He has Northwestern. He has the final game before the Heisman voting or before the Big Ten championship is going to be that Michigan game.
That's right.
That's going to be the last impression for the most part for Heisman voters. How badly, if he plays badly, and if Ohio State loses to Michigan, how do you think that will affect his Heisman chances?
Oh, it'll kill it. And it's somebody else will win it. We see it all the time that how, somebody goes in as the clear favorite and they play poorly and they get passed. It happens. I'm not saying it happens all the time because at the end, Mark Ingram, won it against Auburn. And not that that's the only good game he played, but you can look at a lot of guys and how people vote the award is probably not the best. They got too many people voting on it, and a lot of them don't really follow college football that closely. And it's not a best player in the country award. It's the best quarterback, best skill position guy. It is not a place where a lineman is going to, there's some really good players. I thought Ndamukong Suh was the best player in the country that year. I thought Aaron Donald was the best player in the country from Pitt. They're not going to even get invited. So, and so I think you have to look at it as everybody's in the same boat. CJ Stroud, anybody that doesn't play well down the stretch is going to get passed by somebody that does. And, sometimes you have multiple guys. We had Reggie Bush and Vince Young both look like Heisman Trophy winners. It's only one trophy. Then there's some years where nobody looks like they're a Heisman Trophy winner, but somebody's going to get it. So I don't know how this is going to play out because, again, what's happened to this point is fine. It's just not going to matter when the November games come up because that is going to not overshadow it. It is going to completely, blow away what happened in the early part of the year. And no one's going to pay attention to, because you can look at different things and look at stats and all of that. I mean, so I just, and the other thing too is since really the only time we've had a team with a losing record is with Paul Hornung, and that was the year that Johnny Majors was beaten out. That was controversy, the second most controversy. We were screwed out of the Heisman, Tennessee, folks. I think people can figure out who the other one was. But yeah, so it's a November award. I hate to put it that way. It's a November award. It's not necessarily the way it should be. That's the way the voters do it, and so I think it's great. Look, I get asked to do it, and I kind of put it up, and all I'm going to do is put it by week, and I would have Hendon Hooker in my top 5. Do I think he's going to end up there at the end of the year? Probably not, but that's not because of any other reason that I think it might be more difficult. I don't think Tennessee's played a really good team yet. I think Pitt struggled. I don't think Florida's all that good. So I think every week, including this week, is just building a case for him to maybe be in the mix. But in the end, he could be the number one favorite guy. I've seen this where guys give them the award now, and then they have 2 subpar games in November and get beat, and they're done. They're not even voted. They're not even brought to New York. So, again, we're going to have to wait on that as much as we want to talk about it week in and week out. It really doesn't matter at this point.
It is really funny. I talked to Johnny Majors about that, and he, as far as slights go, he didn't feel nearly as slighted by that as the other slight that happened in 1992. I mean, that Heisman thing compared to being replaced by
that wasn't a slight. This one was a slice, as in knife slicing you. So there's a slight and a slice.
Well, as he likes to say, God rest his soul. Well, I'll tell you one thing: they're working on my front. Well, I'm not going to say what he said. Well, that guy was stabbing me in the back, so I'm on the surgery table, and they're working on my front. He's stabbing me in the back.
That sounds just like him, yeah. That sounds just like him.
Okay, so out of this group we've talked about, and let's throw Will Anderson in there, who's not going to win the Heisman because you're right, it's an offensive award. If you're an Landry, the Landry Warriors NFL team, and you're picking first next year in the NFL draft, who are you taking? I'm taking Will Anderson.
Well, Will Anderson, yeah. I mean, the Heisman has nothing to do with who's going to get taken in the draft. That's nothing to do with it.
Right.
I mean, I think that you're going to see people that, Josh Allen. Look who the best quarterbacks in the league are. Josh Allen of Buffalo, Wyoming. Patrick Mahomes, Texas Tech, who didn't light it up at Texas Tech, who was good. Justin Herbert didn't have a great year at Oregon, but really, really good. Joe Burrow had a great year, and then there's some others obviously that are good. But so I think it's a completely different. That's a football and how they project to the next level. In terms of quarterbacks, I think C.J. Stroud's interesting. But I think the quarterbacks, there's some really good ones, but developing them is going to be key. I think Will Levis is going to be really good at the next level because he's got great intangibles in addition to having the physical skills. But, I think there are a number of guys, but I think Will Anderson is talented a guy and as much of a game wrecker as you're going to find.